Welcome back. Today, we're delving into possibly one of the greatest works of historiography ever produced, the Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. A 14th century Mediterranean Arab scholar, he was a sociologist, philosopher, and historian, widely acknowledged as one of the greatest social scientists of the Middle Ages, and for many, the father of historiography, sociology, economics, and demography studies. Grounded in Islamic legal tradition, Ibn Khaldun's passion for literature, language, and the nuances of expression allowed him to develop a new science of human social organization that pushed the boundaries of conventional historical analysis. Ibn Khaldun's life was marked by extensive travel throughout the Muslim world, serving in various government, legal, and academic positions. However, his ability to travel in the imagination of his own world set him apart from his contemporaries. The Muqaddimah, an introduction to his larger historical work, Kitab al-Ibar, was lauded by Arnold J. Toynbee, the renowned English historian, as undoubtedly the greatest work of its kind that has ever yet been created by any mind in any time or place. The Muqaddimah explores the dynamics of civilization through a combination of empirical observation and theoretical analysis. The originality of Ibn Khaldun's ideas, with his emphasis on critical analysis, contextual understanding, and the study of societal patterns, remains unparalleled. Ibn Khaldun offers a comprehensive and insightful analysis of the nature of civilization and its cyclical evolution through history. He stresses the interplay of factors such as group feeling, leadership, economic activity, and intellectual pursuits in shaping the rise and fall of civilizations. Arthur Laffer, for whom the Laffer curve is named, acknowledged Ibn Khaldun's ideas, as well as others precede his own work on that curve. Economist Paul Krugman described Ibn Khaldun as a 14th century Islamic philosopher who basically invented what we would now call the social sciences. 19th century Scottish theologian and philosopher Robert Flint praised him strongly. As a theorist of history, he has no equal in any age or country until Vico appeared, more than 300 years later. Plato, Aristotle, and Augustine were not his peers, and all others were unworthy of being even mentioned along with him. Ibn Khaldun's work on evolution of societies also influenced Ego Orawan, who introduced the concept of socionomy. So let's dive into today's podcast. As always, please share, like, and subscribe.
Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going back in time, way back, to the 14th century to meet a scholar whose work still matters, even today, Ibn Khaldun.
And when I say matters, I mean it's still studied by the people in the room, business leaders, academics, because it's that insightful. We're diving into his magnum opus, his most important work, the Muqaddimah.
You know, it's funny. The first time I read the Muqaddimah, I was blown away. It's like, how can a book written 600 years ago still be so relevant? But Khaldun, he just got it. You know, the patterns of history, what drives change in societies. It's like he had this crystal ball.
He really did. That's what we're going to unpack today. But so you're not thinking, who is this Ibn Khaldun guy? Let's introduce him. Born in Tunis in 1332, this wasn't some stuffy scholar hiding in a library. Ibn Khaldun was a man of action. Politics, advising rulers, diplomacy, even a judge. He did it all. His family tree goes way back to Yemen, and they were prestigious.
So he came from influence, huh? Were they scholars too?
You bet. Top tier in Andalusian society, Arab and Berber roots scholarship and government were in their blood. But what makes Khaldun different wasn't just who he was related to, but what he lived through. This is a time of chaos, political upheaval everywhere, shifting alliances, you never knew who to trust. He saw empires rise and fall, saw how courts really worked, all the messy stuff of power firsthand.
He wasn't just reading about history, he was living it. And not just in Tunis, you said he traveled all over, right?
Everywhere. North Africa, Egypt, the whole Muslim world. And these weren't just vacations. He was in positions of power, seeing how different societies functioned up close.
He wasn't just watching from the sidelines. He was right there in the game.
Yeah.
So with all that experience, it makes you wonder, why write the Muqaddimah? What was he trying to achieve with this huge project?
It's like this. He was on the road, seeing how history was playing out, right? But he was also reading the history books, and he was getting frustrated. They were full of errors, biased, and nobody was really thinking about history, just writing it down.
So he's like a history rebel, wanting a better way to understand the past. And that's where the Muqaddimah comes in the introduction. That's what it means, right?
Exactly. He meant it to be the intro to a much bigger history of the world, but this book, it became its own masterpiece. We're talking a treatise on civilization, how societies change, power dynamics, institutions, the whole shebang. And the crazy thing is, it's from the 1300s, but it's relevant today.
So let's get into this masterpiece, just so everyone's on the same page. We're going deep on the book's structure, what's in it, all that.
Absolutely. The Muqaddimah is meticulously organized, 6 chapters, each one building on the last one. It's like a puzzle, but for understanding how civilizations work.
So not just random thoughts.
Yeah.
There's a real method to his madness.
It's a blueprint, like I said, for understanding societies. Their rise, their fall, their successes, their failures. All with this foundation of timeless truths about human nature. Remember, he was writing centuries ago, yet it still resonates with the challenges we face today.
Okay, let's break these chapters down then, one by one. No time wasting. He jumps right into the deep end, doesn't he?
Oh, we get straight to the point. Chapter 1 is titled, On Human Civilization in General. No beating around the bush, he's tackling the essence of civilization head on.
So no warm-up act. What's his take on civilization then?
He comes right out and says it. Civilization, it's not a given, it's not some automatic thing, it's something we humans create. It comes from this inherent need to work together, to depend on each other. Unlike animals, we can't just go it alone. Food, shelter, protection, all the basics, we need each other. And that, he says, is what drives us to build societies, make institutions, create order out of chaos.
So it's about organization, this whole civilization thing. How we come together, cooperate, figure out how to survive and thrive collectively.
Precisely. And here's where he introduces a key concept, the umran, which essentially means civilization or social organization. But he sees it as this intricate system, this web of factors, your environment, the economy, politics, culture, all playing a part.
He's acknowledging that it's complicated, this whole civilization thing. It's not just one thing, but the result of all these different forces interacting. He's thinking big picture here.
Absolutely. And he's clear that these elements, they aren't working in isolation. They're all intertwined, always influencing and shaping each other. This holistic view, this understanding that civilization is like a spider web, everything connected, that's part of Khaldun's genius.
Like he's building a model in his mind, this dynamic model of society, all the gears turning together, creating this complex, always evolving machine. He doesn't just describe the parts. He's showing how they work together, how they can lead to both progress and, well, decline.
Exactly. And remember, this is just chapter 1 on human civilization in general. He's setting the stage here. This chapter is the foundation for everything he's going to explore in the rest of the book.
He's building a framework, like a set of lenses, to examine all the complexities of civilization and unravel the mysteries within it. It's incredible how insightful this is, even for us today.
Absolutely. And don't forget, he wasn't writing in some peaceful utopia. The Islamic world, which was once this center of knowledge and culture, it was facing hard times. Internal struggles, political instability, threats from outside, economic troubles, the whole 9 yards.
He wasn't just theorizing from some ivory tower. He was writing from experience, having witnessed firsthand how fragile civilizations can be, how history seems to repeat itself, and those timeless truths about us humans, right?
Exactly. All his experiences, they shaped his thinking, leading him to this unique and honestly insightful perspective on power, how societies change, and if we can actually create a better world.
It's like he's on this quest to answer these big, timeless questions. Why do civilizations fall apart? What makes them last and prosper? Can we learn from the past to avoid repeating the same mistakes?
Exactly. And he may not have had all the answers, but his insights in the Muqaddimah, they still resonate with us, still offer valuable guidance for navigating our own complex world.
We've got this foundation then, this understanding of civilization as a complex, interconnected system. But how is this system shaped? What forces really drive its development? And this is where things get really interesting, right? His ideas about the environment, the role of nomadic people, this whole concept of asabiya, that's where we're headed next.
You got it. And this is where his structured approach really shines. In Chapter 2, on Bedouin civilization, savage nations and tribes and their conditions, he shifts the focus to a specific group, nomadic cultures, especially the Bedouin Arabs. He believed understanding them held the key to understanding the rise and fall of civilizations.
Interesting. So he zeroes in on this one type of social organization that was common in his time, and let's be honest, had a huge impact on history.
Yeah.
And he probably met a lot of nomadic people on his travels, right?
You know it. Having lived among and interacted with Bedouin tribes, Khaldun brought a totally unique perspective to his work. This wasn't just some theoretical armchair analysis. He was drawing on first-hand observations of their customs, their social structures, how they interacted with the settled societies around them.
He wasn't reading about them. He was living amongst them, experiencing their way of life. That adds a whole other level of depth to his analysis.
You're telling me. And this is where his concept of asabiya takes center stage. It's a tricky word to translate, but think of it as group feeling, social solidarity, even tribalism in a way. He argued that the Bedouins, because of their harsh lifestyle, constantly fighting to survive in the desert, relying on each other completely, they developed incredibly strong asabiya. That unshakable bond, that loyalty to their tribe, it was make or break for their survival.
Like the ultimate team spirit, forged in the fires of hardship. That sense of unity of we're in this together, putting the group above your own desires, that's what allowed them to make it in such a tough environment.
Precisely. And Khaldun argues that this fierce asabiya, it's what made those Bedouin tribes such a force throughout history. It allowed them to conquer vast empires, overthrow dynasties, redraw the map literally. He saw this clear link. The stronger a group's asabiya, the more they could achieve, overcome any obstacle, and become dominant.
He wasn't romanticizing them, though, was he? He was analyzing them, their social dynamics, what made them tick, how their lifestyle translated into real historical power.
Exactly. And here's where his thinking takes another interesting turn. He argued that while this asabiya, this group feeling, could make you incredibly strong, it could also be your downfall. He saw that as the Bedouin tribes went from nomads to a more settled life, started accumulating wealth and getting used to the comforts of the city, their asabiya, it weakened.
So it's like the more successful they became, the weaker they got. That's a tough lesson.
It is, and it's a pattern we see throughout history, even today. Khaldun argues that this shift, from struggling to thrive to kind of resting on your laurels, it erodes those values that brought you success in the first place. Hard work, discipline, putting the group first. Individuals start looking out for themselves more, and that shared purpose, that willingness to sacrifice it, fades.
It's like the classic rise and fall, isn't it? You become successful, get comfortable, forget what got you there in the first place.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if it's baked into human nature or something.
It's a question that's puzzled people for ages, hasn't it? But Khaldun gives us this framework for understanding it. He's saying that when societies go from that early struggle to a more comfortable existence, the glue that holds them together, that asabiya, it can start to come undone. Luxury, abundance, it's tempting, but it can chip away at the very things that made you successful in the first place.
Talk about a cautionary tale, right? Leaders in any field, business, politics, you name it, they better be taking notes. It's easy to rest on your laurels, to lose sight of those core values that were crucial when you were just starting out.
Absolutely. And Khaldun doesn't just throw this out there as a theory. He backs it up with historical examples, empires, dynasties. He'd seen it all. Which brings us to Chapter 3, on dynasties, royal authority, the caliphate, and government ranks. A discussion of these things and of the accidents that happen to them. He dives into the nature of power itself and how those who have it, well, how they handle it.
So we're going from groups to governments now, seeing how this asabiya thing plays out on a bigger stage.
Exactly. Khaldun argues that this royal authority, this power, invested in a ruler or a ruling class. It doesn't just exist in a bubble that's not just about brute force or because some god ordained it. He sees it as an extension of asabiya. It's like a group united by their common bonds. They hand their power over to a leader or a group of elites to keep things in check, protect their interests, and achieve their goals together.
It's like taking that tribal system, those informal power structures, and making it official, turning it into the institutions we see in empires and nation states. But the basic idea is the same, right? The stronger the asabiya, the stronger and more stable the leadership is going to be.
Precisely, and that connects directly to his analysis of what he calls the dynastic cycle, which he goes into way deeper in Chapter 4. Just like those nomadic tribes, when they get settled and comfortable and their asabiya weakens dynasties and empires, they can fall into the same trap.
It's that cycle again, isn't it?
So,
Growth, complacency, and ultimately decline or renewal.
yeah.
Makes you wonder, are we today, like our modern nations, even superpowers,
Yeah.
are we subject to the same forces?
It's a question we should all be asking. He says that the first generation, those who fought to establish the dynasty, the ones who went through hardship, who truly believed in something bigger than themselves, they're often the most capable, the most dedicated to the common good.
They built the system so they understand its value, right? They remember the hard work, the sacrifice, because they lived it. They're driven by a vision, not just personal gain.
Exactly. But as time passes, their kids, grandkids, they inherit the privileges of power, but they didn't go through those same struggles. Things start to change. They get used to luxury, lose touch with everyday people, become more interested in holding on to their power and status than in actually serving the people.
It's that saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. With the founders' kids, they grow up spoiled, never had to fight for anything, so they lose that drive.
Right. And that's when things start to unravel. Asabiya fades, divisions appear, and suddenly the dynasty. It's vulnerable to challenges from within, threats from outside, everything. That leads us into Chapter 4 on countries and cities and the conditions occurring in them, such as uprisings and rebellions. Here, Khaldun breaks down his theory of the dynastic cycle step by step, these repeating patterns throughout history.
Anyone in a position of power should have this chapter bookmarked. Talk about a reality check on how fleeting power can be. It's a reminder that if you forget those values, those principles that made you successful, well, it can all come crashing down.
Absolutely. Khaldun lays out 5 stages of this dynastic cycle. First stage, conquest. The dynasty's rise to power. This is when the struggle's real, hardship and sacrifice everywhere, but asabiya is at its peak. Those founders, they're united by their vision, they'll fight for what they believe in, and they're all about the greater good.
It's like the birth of a nation, a movement, or even a startup, right? That raw energy, the shared sense of purpose.
1 point. Second stage. Power solidifies, institutions are built. The dynasty, now it's secure, starts focusing on creating a stable society. Laws get codified, bureaucracies pop up, systems.
It's that transition, going from fighting for survival to building for the long haul.
Exactly, but that's also where the danger of complacency creeps in. Third stage. The peak. Prosperity, stability, maybe a golden age, arts and culture flourishing. The dynasty's reaping the rewards. Infrastructure, patronage, expanding influence.
It's like that moment when everything's clicking.
It is, but here's the catch. Stage 4. Complacency sets in. Sabir, remember that glue? It weakens. The elites, used to their privileges, they get detached from the everyday people's problems. They become soft.
Beginning of the end, right?
Yeah.
Success, ironically, becomes its own worst enemy.
It does. And that paves the way for Stage 5, the collapse. Sometimes it's gradual, a slow fade out. Sometimes it's sudden. Revolution, invasion, boom.
A sobering reminder that nothing lasts forever. Even the biggest, strongest empires, they all face those forces of history, those cycles of change.
Khaldun's analysis, it's not just some history lesson. It's about understanding power, building strong institutions, and never losing sight of those values that lead to success. Complacency, corruption, a fading asabiya, those can bring even the mightiest empires to their knees.
A lesson that's relevant whether you're running a country, a company, or even just your own life, right?
100%. Khaldun's insights, they offer a roadmap for leaders, reminding them that building a strong culture, one that values hard work, discipline, a shared mission that's crucial. He also stresses how important strong institutions are, good governance, a commitment to fairness.
It's not just about getting power, it's about what you do with it, right? Using it wisely, ethically, to help everyone, not just yourself or a select few.
Exactly. Which leads us to a crucial part of Khaldun's analysis, economics. Chapter 5, on the various aspects of making a living, such as profit and the crafts. He shifts gears from the grand stage of history, the power struggles, to something more everyday but still fundamental, how people make a living, the work they do, the impact it has on society as a whole.
Zooming in, right? From the big picture of civilization to the nitty-gritty of daily life. Because how people earn a living, it matters just as much as the political systems that govern them.
You got it. Khaldun, remember he'd worn many hats. Scholar, judge, advisor to rulers. He understood firsthand that economics isn't just about putting food on the table. It's about social status, power dynamics, who gets what in a society. He was really sharp, picking up on the connections between economics and social structures, how the way a society organizes its economic activity, it directly impacts its well-being.
He was interested in the real world, right? How people actually lived, the challenges they faced, not just some abstract economic theories.
Exactly. He digs into the specifics, different crafts, professions, analyzing the skills, the knowledge, the social structures tied to each one. Agriculture, animal husbandry, trade, manufacturing, craftsmanship, government, even the arts and entertainment, he covers it all.
A 14th century career guide, almost.
You could say that, but he doesn't just stop at describing them. He analyzes their social and economic implications. He points out how some jobs had higher status than others, how wealth distribution influenced who had the power, how economic specialization actually made societies more interdependent and complex.
He's revealing the economic underpinnings of society, showing how interconnected everything is: work, power, status, governance. It's all part of the same fabric.
Exactly. This understanding of how economics and society are intertwined, that's another of Khaldun's major contributions. He's saying these economic forces, they aren't separate from social and political forces. They're all tangled up, always influencing and shaping each other.
It's a perspective that's often missing in how we talk about economics today.
Sure.
All those abstract models, statistics, they often miss the human side of it, the social and political realities.
For sure. Khaldun reminds us that we can't just deal with these things separately. We need a more integrated approach, one that sees how complex these forces are and aims to create a world that's fairer, more equal, and sustainable for everyone.
We've covered the foundations of civilization, nomadic cultures, power dynamics, those cycles of history, economics. But what about the life of the mind? How did Khaldun view knowledge, the arts, sciences, the transmission of culture? That's where Chapter 6, on the various kinds of sciences, the methods of instruction, and the conditions occurring in these connections, comes in, right?
You know it. In this last chapter, Khaldun circles back to a theme he's been weaving throughout the Muqaddimah, the power of knowledge. He's not talking about just memorizing facts, though. He sees knowledge as transformative, essential for both individuals and societies to progress. He truly believed that a society's commitment to learning, to asking questions, to thinking critically, that was vital to its well-being, to an ability to adapt and thrive as the world changes.
And that's as true today as it was back then, maybe even more so. With technology changing everything so fast, globalization, information overload, being able to think for yourself, adapt to new challenges, keep learning, it's essential.
No doubt. Khaldun, being a scholar and a teacher himself, he really understood what it meant to pursue knowledge, the rewards, but also the pitfalls. He knew knowledge could be used for good or bad, to enlighten or to manipulate. He also knew there were limits to what we could know, the dangers of dogma, of blindly believing something just because someone in authority said so.
So he wasn't saying reason will solve everything. He was more nuanced than that. He understood that knowledge is a tool, powerful, but it can be misused. It all depends on the intentions of the one using it.
That's it. And that nuanced thinking, it's there in how he talks about different types of knowledge. He breaks it down into two main categories: religious sciences and intellectual sciences. He saw both as essential for a well-rounded, thriving society.
Recognizing that we need both faith and reason, the spiritual and the material, to truly live a meaningful life.
Exactly. To him, religious sciences included Islamic law, theology, studying the Quran and the Hadith. He believed these disciplines gave individuals a moral compass, a way to make ethical decisions, a sense of purpose that went beyond just the material world.
It's that human need for something bigger than ourselves, isn't it? That connection to something greater, whether it's God, a set of principles, a cause. We all seem to crave that.
We do. And Khaldun, a devout Muslim himself, he believed that the core truths within these religious sciences, they were universal. It wasn't about specific doctrines or dogma. It was about those fundamental truths that he saw as vital for a just and compassionate society, one that valued everyone and recognized our shared humanity.
He wasn't pushing for a narrow view of religion then, but he saw its power, right? To inspire, to uplift, to provide those moral guidelines.
Exactly. But he also knew that faith without reason, well, that could lead to fanaticism, to blindly following dogma, to rejecting the world as it is. That's where those intellectual sciences came in.
Finding that balance between faith and reason, right? Exploring both the spiritual realm and the material world.
Precisely. For him, those intellectual sciences covered a lot of ground. Philosophy, math, astronomy, medicine, natural sciences, you name it. He saw them as crucial for understanding the world around us, creating new technologies, improving our lives.
Using all the tools in the toolbox, right? Combining the wisdom of the past with new discoveries, all in the pursuit of a better future.
Exactly. And he didn't just categorize these fields of knowledge, he went deep, analyzing their methods, their limits, their potential benefits and risks. He stressed the importance of rigorous analysis, critical thinking, constantly questioning what we think we know.
Almost like he was paving the way for the scientific method, emphasizing observation, testing, being willing to admit when you're wrong.
Interesting way to put it. He also understood that knowledge exists within a social and cultural context, that different societies have different intellectual traditions, different ways of passing knowledge down. He compared educational systems of his time, different parts of the Muslim world, even Europe.
Like he was conducting a global study of education, recognizing that there are many valid approaches, that different cultures might have different but equally effective ways to spark curiosity and transmit knowledge.
You got it. And this openness to different perspectives, this recognition that there are many paths to knowledge and understanding, that's another one of Khaldun's strengths. He was a product of his time and place, but he could also see beyond that, to grasp that bigger picture, to see what connects us as humans despite our differences.
A much-needed perspective today, don't you think? In a world so often divided by ideologies, religions, cultures. Khaldun reminds us that while those differences are real, they don't erase our shared humanity, our common desire to learn, to understand, to create a better future.
Amen to that. His work reminds us that pursuing knowledge, searching for understanding, building a fairer, more equitable world, these aren't solo missions. We need to work together, talk to each other, learn from each other, even when we disagree.
So we've journeyed through all 6 chapters of the Muqaddimah, exploring Khaldun's ideas about civilization, nomadic cultures, the dynamics of power, those cycles of history, economics, and the power of knowledge. This book, it's incredibly rich, full of insights that are as relevant today as they were in the 1300s.
I agree. The Muqaddimah is a testament to what the human mind can achieve through observation, critical thinking, and a deep understanding of our own nature. It's a book that still has the power to challenge us, inspire us, centuries after it was written. And for anyone trying to understand our complex world and build a better future, wow, this book offers some valuable guideposts.
It reminds us that the past isn't just something to be studied. It's full of wisdom we can use to navigate the challenges we face today. Ibn Khaldun, with his sharp mind, his curiosity, his compassion for humanity, he's one of history's greatest guides, illuminating the path towards a more just, equitable, and enlightened world.
No doubt about it. His work is a gift, really, a treasure trove of wisdom we can draw on to create a better future. But before we wrap up our dip dive into the Muqaddimah, let's take a moment to consider how it was received, not just during Khaldun's lifetime, but across the centuries.
An important point. Even a book as groundbreaking as the Muqaddimah must have had its critics. It's always fascinating to see how the world reacts to new ideas, especially ones that challenge the way things are.
You're right. And with Khaldun, the reception of his work is a story in itself. During his life, it was definitely seen as a big intellectual accomplishment. He had scholars praising him, even some rulers. But it didn't exactly become an instant bestseller, didn't have the kind of influence you'd expect given its brilliance. There are probably a few reasons for that. One being, and we've touched on this, his ideas were revolutionary. Light years ahead of their time, you could say.
He was shaking things up, making people uncomfortable, questioning the very foundations of how they understood the world. That's never an easy pill to swallow, especially for those in power.
Exactly. And that ties into the second reason his book maybe didn't take off immediately, the political landscape. Remember, it was a time of chaos, empires crumbling, new ones popping up, wars everywhere. In times like those, new ideas, especially ones that challenge the powers that be, well, let's just say they weren't always welcomed with open arms.
Like trying to have a calm, reasoned debate in the middle of an earthquake. Not exactly the best environment for thoughtful reflection.
You could say that again. But here's the thing. Even with those challenges, his work, it survived. It got copied, shared, studied by scholars all over the Muslim world. And slowly, its influence started to spread. But it really wasn't until the 1800s when this thing called Orientalism emerged, Western scholars getting really interested in Eastern cultures, that Khaldun finally got his due on a global scale.
So in a way, it took a fresh perspective, an outside perspective even, to fully appreciate his genius.
It's ironic, isn't it? But these European scholars, they were blown away by the Muqaddimah, its originality, its depth. They started translating it, and as his ideas made their way west, it sparked all sorts of debates.
What were some of the big criticisms, the points of contention?
One of the main ones is that his whole cyclical view of history, especially the dynastic cycle, some found it too deterministic.
Meaning?
Like, it didn't leave enough room for free will, for the possibility that we could break free from these cycles. They pointed to examples of societies that had adapted, reformed, avoided that seemingly inevitable decline that Khaldun laid out.
So they felt he was too rigid, that he didn't fully account for the unpredictable nature of human behavior.
That's one way to look at it. Others questioned his emphasis on asabiyya. They agreed it was insightful, but some felt it was too simplistic.
Simplistic in what sense?
Like, by focusing so much on group feeling as the primary driver of history, he might have missed other crucial factors, things like economic systems, technological advancements, even just the impact of individual leaders.
So they're saying, hey, it's more complicated than that.
Exactly. They weren't dismissing asabiyya, just advocating for a more nuanced understanding of all those different forces that shape history.
Fair enough. It's rarely just one thing, right? History is messy.
Messier than I know. Well, you get the idea. But those are just a couple of the criticisms. Important to remember, though, that debate, disagreement, that's all part of the process.
It's how we refine our understanding, right? Through those back and forths, we gain a more sophisticated appreciation for complex ideas.
Exactly. And despite the criticisms, the Muqaddimah, its impact is undeniable. Scholars are still studying it, debating it across so many fields. History, sociology, political science, economics.
It's transcended its origins, become one of those books that's just essential reading no matter what you study.
Absolutely. And his insights on power, those cycles of history, institutions, how everything's connected, it's all incredibly relevant, even today.
So as we wrap up our deep dives into Ibn Khaldun and the Muqaddimah, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What wisdom from this 14th century scholar can we apply to our 21st century lives?
I think the biggest one is this. While the specifics of human societies change, the fundamentals of power, how societies change, and human nature itself, they stay remarkably consistent.
We may have smartphones and the internet, but deep down we're still dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah, different packaging, same core issues. Take asabiyya, for example. It's not just some ancient history concept. It's playing out all around us in social movements, political parties, even in companies and sports teams. Understanding that group dynamic, how powerful it can be, but also how fragile. That's essential for anyone in a leadership position.
And the dynastic cycle, too, right? It's not just about kings and empires anymore. It applies to businesses, institutions, maybe even entire nations. It's a reminder that success can make you complacent, that power can corrupt, that staying adaptable is key.
Exactly. It's about building strong ethical foundations, having a shared sense of purpose, and being willing to adapt and evolve.
Ultimately, the Muqaddimah is a testament to the power of our minds, our ability to observe, to think critically, to seek understanding. Studying history isn't just about memorizing names and dates. It's about uncovering those deeper patterns, learning from the past to create a better future.
We're not just along for the ride. We have the power to shape history.
We can learn from our mistakes, adapt, and strive for a world that's more just and equitable. And Ibn Khaldun, he's like this guide, right? Leading us towards a brighter future if we're willing to listen. Well, on that note, that wraps up our deep dives into Ibn Khaldun and the Muqaddimah. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even inspiring. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out wisdom wherever it may be found.